Alright, during this lesson, we are going to add materials. Alright, so I'm going to create an object out on the screen, and I'm going to add a material to it. I'm going to get rid of these segments here by changing the segments over here. So now I just have an easy cube to work with one face each. So I'm going to convert it into an editable poly. And now I am going to create a material. So I'm going to press M to open up the material editor. And I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to Materials, General, Physical Material. Double click to activate it. If the material doesn't have these dashed lines around it, then you are not inside of that material making changes to it. So, another thing that you want to do is right click, Show Shaded Material in Viewport. If you don't do that, your material will not work. It will not show up. It will work, but it won't show up down here in the viewport. So if your material isn't half blue and half red like this, then it is not going to show up while you're working. So I'm just going to create a very easy way to add color to this cube and a reflective material. Physical materials, by their nature, are very glossy and shiny. So if you're creating materials that appear to have that gloss and shine, or if you need a material that does that, it's a physical material is a good option for that. We don't have any lights in this scene, so it's hard to tell the glossiness, the reflection, and the shine, but I just added a basic material to this cube. So I created, by right-clicking Materials, General, Physical Material. I'm going to double-click the material so it has the dashed lines around it. I'm going to minimize it by clicking this button over here to give myself more room. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to select Show Shaded Material in Viewport. Now it's half blue and half red. And what I'm going to do on this material that I didn't do up here is name it something right here descriptive. If you have a project with over 300 materials in it and none of them are named, it's going to be very hard to figure out what is going on. So I'm just going to call this, let's say I was making a grass for a material. So I just call this grass. I'm going to click right here for the base color and reflections on this box right here. I'm going to double click it and I'm going to choose a green color. And now I'm going to add it to the box. So just to keep it consistent, I'm going to double click this material here and I'm going to rename it, just name it something sky blue. That way it's named. Great idea to name your materials every single time. Get in that habit. Now there are a ton of options down here in the materials that we're going to go over in a later date, but right now I'm just going to keep it simple in the introduction, and we're just going to use basic materials for this. So what I have done now is added one material to an object. Okay? The whole object is the solid material that I created. Let's say I want to create multiple colors on this polygon, so I'm going to select a polygon by pressing 4 or clicking on the polygon sub-object level, and now I simply drag the material that I wish to be on that face here. Alright, let's do it again. I'm going to hold Control to make multiple selections, and I'm going to add this blue to this material here. So now I've put multiple materials on an object. Now I'm going to get out of this object, and I'm going to copy it while holding Shift. Let's make 2 copies. So now I have 3 boxes here. I'm going to create a brand new material. Right click, Materials, General. Let's do Arnold. No, let's do General, Physical Material. I'll keep it the same, not to confuse anybody. So I'm going to double click, right click, Show Shaded Material in Viewport. Now it's half blue and half red here. I've minimized the window so it takes up less space. It's arranged nicely. You always want to arrange your materials nice and neat. And I'm going to rename it here, and I'm just going to name it Yellow Sun. Alright, I'm going to create a yellow material. And I want to add this material to multiple objects. So right now I could drag this out to this object, and then if I wanted to make all of these yellow, I could do it one by one, or I could hold Control and select all these objects and simply drag this one material to the objects that I have selected. A window is going to pop up. Would you like to assign it to a selection? I say OK. So now it is all yellow. Okay, so that was how you create base colors materials for an object. Alright, I'm going to delete these objects. I'm going to create another object, a box, and let's say a sphere. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is use pictures as materials. So I'm going to right click, choose materials, physical material. I'm going to minimize this, double click, activate it, and I'm going to call this, I'll name this in a second once I figure out what material it's going to be. Right click, show shaded material in viewport, and now I'm going to, instead of clicking the color box to change the color, I'm going to click this little box right next to here, and then I'm going to double click bitmap. A bitmap is another way of saying that it's an image that I'm using as a material. So I'm going to double click bitmap. Now I'm going to go to my desktop where I've saved images, and I'm going to select the eye. Make sure it's hooked up right here. Now I can rename this material eye. Now, if let's say I added the wrong material or I want to change it later, I can right click on this M and I can clear it out and then add another material. But for this instance, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to drag the material out to the object, and you see that now if I press F4, the lines toggle off and you can see the material here. And now, in the same way that we created multiple materials on an object with the base colors, now I'm going to do that with the images. Step one is converting your object into an editable poly and selecting the polygons that you want to alter. And you'll notice here, when I select one polygon, I'm going to drag this material to this polygon. You'll notice that the base color right now, the generic color, the arbitrary color that's assigned to an object when you create it, it's green right now. It's going to turn gray. That just means that the generic color that was randomly assigned to this object when you create it has been erased. You've erased the material information. So don't be alarmed if you add a material to an object and the color disappears. It's going to do that. Now, if it was a color that you wanted to keep, let's say it was green, and once you added the material, it turned gray, all you have to do is simply create a green material and go back, select the polygons you wish to be green, and add it to it. Okay, so I'm going to get out of this material. Now I have a green cube with an eye on it. Let's do something else. Let's make a plane, and I'm going to create a new material, materials, general, physical material, minimize it, double click it, select it, right click, show shaded material in viewport. I'm going to add another image. Let's say it's going to be sunrise, so I'll just name the material sunrise, and I will drag it here. Okay, let's say that this picture isn't exactly the way I want it. I want to zoom in on a certain part of this image. I don't want the whole picture to show. So what I can do now, well, I'll get into that in the next video.